Saturday was the last day of development camp. I published my development camp in-depth wrap-up story. I've done this for years. I've always viewed it's less so now, I think, because the coverage group is younger and, to be blunt, more motivated than they were back then. But I remember back when I got started at Broad Street Hockey, I realized very quickly that the vast majority of the older beat writers gave zero shits about development camp. They just didn't care. They would show up for the first day and they'd show up for the scrimmage, and then every other day they wouldn't show up. It just wasn't worth their time. It was the summer. And I came to the conclusion, like, if I want to separate my coverage, this is a way to do it, because no one is there. And I can provide the type of videos and in-depth prospect evaluations that no one else is doing, because no one else gives enough of a shit. So I just kind of kept doing it. And after every development camp, I do this in-depth story. I record tons of videos on my phone. I take notes. I go to every single session. And then I just kind of try to give people a good idea of how they all look. Now, obviously, development camp, you're not making any final decisions on a player. It's a teaching camp, but these guys are trying to impress the brass. And the brass is watching these guys to see what they have in them, especially the guys they just drafted. First time they're seeing them on their ice wearing Flyers orange and black. So it is valuable, and you learn a lot about who they are as players. And that's what this piece does. I go into, really, I kind of in-depth broke down about 8 guys, and then I did little quick hits on another 8. But we're going to get into this in a few minutes, some of my observations on the bigger players. But the meat of the article is on allphly.com. It is for diehards only, so check that out if you want to learn more, watch more. There's tons of video clips, quotes from we had quotes from Riley Armstrong, from Nick Schultz, from Sam Moran, from Brent Flair, quotes from the players. So it's a really in-depth piece, a piece I'm proud of doing every year. So check it out.
And I was like, just listening to, yes, it's very difficult to, okay, well, because of this dev camp, this is what I think this guy is going to be. But just tracking the progress, like, you've seen a lot of these now.
Yes.
And like listening to Martinez and Meltzer on Flyers Daily today, they're like, it's hard to say, okay, this is what Denver Barkey's going to be. But I can tell you, from last year's development camp to this year's, this is what I've seen is different. And like, you having been to a bunch of them and being able to track that progress, you're able to draw on that a little bit.
I was actually really excited to see Denver Barkey this year, because we didn't really get to see him last year at development camp. He got banged up early, if I remember correctly, and barely was on the ice. I actually don't know if he ever hit the ice. Chiernik was on the ice, got hurt, and then missed. But Barkey was a disappointment, because I remember being really excited about that draft pick when they made it last year, and really pumped to see him on the ice for dev camp. He didn't really participate in dev camp. This is his first development camp, and he was impressive.
So this is, go to allphly.com, sign up to be a diehard, get all Charlie's videos, get the breakdown, the complete, the place to go for all development camp coverage, the final say, if you will. But right now I want to talk a little bit about Saturday's scrimmage and just your overall impressions of some of these guys. And, It was funny. I mentioned listening to Flyers Daily earlier. They talked about Jett Luchanko. Signs at 17, won't be 18 till August 21st. Could very well be the youngest player that they've ever signed. Like, if anyone would know that, it's Meltzer. And like, I can't come up with anyone.
Right.
But it's just kind of crazy to think, talking about when you started. Like, yeah, there's probably a lot of the beat reporters, the coverage left from a long time who'd been doing it a while. It's like, draft picks, prospects. Oh, you mean trade pieces? you mean ammunition with names, like with names written on it. Like, that's all this is. And it has changed a little bit as the game has changed. Luckily, you were kind of there and, got to start that from good old BroadStreetHockey.com. Let's start with that young man, Jett Luchanko, 17, leaves camp with an ELC in his pocket. When you sign at 17, like, do your parents have to be there?
I don't.
I don't think is that
so.
Illegal?
I guess.
Can you sign an employment contract? Like, if it doesn't kick in till you're 18?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know.
I don't
It's
know.
A good question.
I just
I don't know what the Canadian rules are.
You can't.
Because presumably he has to,
I guess
go under both
he's a
rules,
Canadian,
right? He's a Canadian citizen.
Like,
so like he's
you
going under a work visa, I presume.
You can't rent a car till you're like 25. You can sign a contract to be employed with like Comcast Spectacor in the NHL. Whatever. Anyway, Jett Luchanko. We all have heard about his speed. The more we've looked into him, like the combine results, super impressive.
Sure.
You mentioned some things that really stuck out positively and negatively last week as we went through each day of development camp. What'd you see in the game and overall impressions of the 13th overall pick from 2024?
I thought he was really impressive in the scrimmage. I thought the scrimmage was the best he looked at camp. What you usually see with these guys at development camps, and I've been to enough to know that this is very much a thing, especially the guys who just got drafted and all the eyes are on them. They usually start slow at camps, at the development camp, because I think they're just a little nervous. It's a whirlwind week. They just got drafted. They hopped on a plane, fly to Voorhees, to Philadelphia first, and then go to Voorhees. And you just get the sense in the beginning they're a little overwhelmed. They're a little starstruck by it all. But as camp progressed, I thought Luchanko looked better and better. Like the skating, that popped right off the jump. He's an incredible skater. He was the best skater at this camp by far. I mean, guys like Gendron and J.R. Avon are very quick skaters, but no one had the skating ability, all-around skating ability.
It just, oh, shit.
Yes, that Luchanko has. But what I really liked in the scrimmage and what really showed in the scrimmage in a way that it just can't really show in drills and in practices is just the details of his game. You can see why the Flyers after the draft and presumably before the draft as well, why they were so adamant that he's a center, because he has those little details that make you think, yeah, he can stick in the middle. He thinks the game at a high level in terms of, you're always seeing him checking behind him to make sure no one's getting behind him. He settles in down low in the zone to provide support for his defenseman as an outlet on breakouts. There were some really slick little neutral zone passes where he was kind of able to facilitate his wingers getting up ice faster because he knew what he was going to do before he actually did it, even though he was under pressure in the neutral zone. There were just a lot of little things he did that made you think like, yeah, I don't know what his ceiling is, but the floor is very high because he does all of these things. And that popped in a way that it just can't pop in drills and in practice. And then you add in the skating, you add in the soft hands, the quick hands in close. He's good at finishing in close. And you can see why they're so high on him. Now, it wasn't perfect, and I mentioned this in the story, that I wasn't in love with his creative passing ability. The decision-making sometimes wasn't great. Sometimes he was forcing passes. And the one thing that did jump out at me, especially in the drills, and it was the case in the scrimmage too, is that he needs to get better at protecting the puck. He gets the puck knocked away, not in terms of getting hit, but in terms of protecting it away from stick checks. He lost the puck a lot. And if that doesn't get fixed, it's going to limit his ceiling because he's not going to be able to take full advantage of the speed that he has and the finishing ability that he has if he can't get through the waves of defenders that allow you to get to those dangerous areas.
That just strikes me as something like it just needs to become more of a focus because he's been able to get by. Like if you have that type of speed, a defender is just going to be like, well, fuck this. I'm playing 2 stink lengths off of him, so he just doesn't burn me.
Yeah.
And then speed of the game difference, these dudes can skate. First round picks, whatever. Obviously, he still has the standout skating, but they're used to really fast dudes. And they'll I'm going to get up on him a little bit and see if I can neutralize his speed before he gets going. Whereas probably a lot of defensemen he's played in his life are like, I'm just not going to become part of this guy's highlight reel.
Yeah.
And so it just has to be more of a focus adjusting to what higher level competition is going to be. Might be tough, but you mentioned Sean Couturier, who has become a pretty damn good power forward and has great hands around the net, or at least did before this prior season. It's just something that can be worked on.
Yeah, it can. The big question you're going to have is, does he have the offensive creativity, the vision to take full advantage of his skill set. And that's something that I noted. I believe I noted it in my my pre-draft prospect preview video that I did on Jett Luchanko, is just that you don't know what the ceiling is, because it's like, does he, it's not even that he doesn't think the game at a high level, because he does. The details are there. The hockey IQ is there. The question is, does he have the offensive creativity to find the guy that no one else can see, but he can, you know, to take the right route through the neutral zone so he doesn't end up just like running himself into the corner. But he can see that, like, well, if I make this little pivot or whatever, and he has the skating ability to do it, but if I make this little pivot, if I slow down and then speed up, I'll be able to get to an open area rather than just running myself into a puck battle. That's the question. And we're going to see over the next couple of years if he can. The exciting part about Luchanko, and you spoke to this a second ago, he's young. He's really young. And usually, not always, but usually, on average, the guys who are drafted young tend to have, they just have upside that like the older guys don't have. And that was a concern about, for example, Yakimchuk. Yakimchuk was an old player for his draft class. So the idea of like, yeah, he's the super high upside defenseman, and he might be. It was tempered a little bit by the fact that, like, well, he's old for his draft year. So maybe he's not the kind of high ceiling guy that people hoped he was going to be. Whereas Luchanko is young for his draft year. So he's been playing against older players pretty much his whole life. Now he'll have almost an extra 8 or 9 months over a guy like Yakimchuk to further develop.
Like, you see the tools of, and like Yakimchuk might end up being a Norris guy. Who the hell knows? But you just see the tools and you go, well, if he puts this all together, and perhaps at a certain age you go like, well, he would have connected A, and maybe not A, B, and C, but like he would have connected A and C by now. And then we'll see if B comes like, yeah. Whereas a guy who's almost a year younger, it's like, well, next year's really his big development year. Like, that could technically be, you know, he wouldn't even be super old for next year's draft.
Yeah.
You know, he'd still be 18 when they draft him. All right. I have staked my claim to Hunter McDonald. He's officially #my guy. It sounded like he looked pretty good. In the scrimmage. Look at this smile. He is. Like, you're smitten.
No. Like, I'm seriously considering just like making the new bit being that I believe in Hunter McDonald. I believe in Hunter McDonald.
That would be so fun for your brand, just to see what the analytics haters would have to say about you liking Hunter McDonald. Yeah. No, it would turn into your shill for the organization. Oh,
of course.
That's what it would be. Of course,
yes.
Danny and Jonesy love Hunter.
Right.
And if you start loving Hunter, well, fuck the analytics. We're not mad at you for being a nerd. We're mad at you for having orange glasses. That's what it would become.
Exactly.
It would be fun to see the switch, though.
I think what I can say about Hunter McDonald at this camp is that I now have a much better understanding as to why they like him as much as they do. Because the things that they like about him are extremely apparent. And also, and this is something that's in the piece, like, the big thing with the concerns about Hunter McDonald is, and because you bring up the fact, well, he didn't score that much in college, and the obvious retort you get from his defenders are, well, he's a stay-at-home defenseman. He's a defensive defenseman. He doesn't have to score that much. And that's true. However, even the best defensive defenseman in the NHL scored a fair amount in lower levels. Like Chris Tanev, maybe the best defensive defenseman of the last few years, or like maybe probably the last like 6 or 7 years. I mean, top-tier guy who was a top-notch trade choice for Dallas at the deadline. He scored 28 points in 41 games in his 1 year in college. And then you have like Adam Pelech, another really good like defensive defenseman shutdown guy. He was nearly a point per game in his final year in juniors. Like, no, their offense never translated, but they had some of it. Whereas Hunter McDonald had 2 goals in college and 20 points in 2 years. So that's the concern. And that's why the analytics people are always going to be skeptical of him. However, I will say that he showed more offensive ability at this camp definitely more than he showed in past step camps, but way more than I expected. He had one play, and I have the video up on the article, where he has a really good gap on Cole Knuble. This was, I believe, in the 4-on-4 portion of the third period. It's a really good gap on Cole Knuble. He breaks up the entry, knocks the puck down the ice, and then it's basically just them two chasing it on the puck. and Cole Knuble is not a great skater, but he's gotten better. He's quicker. He's a guy who, given his size and given the fact that he plays forward, you would expect him to be faster than Hunter McDonald. Hunter McDonald basically passes Cole Knuble, despite the fact that he started about a stride and a half behind him in the initial race. Then he just basically manhandles him and throws him to the side to get the puck. And then he sets up a quality chance for a teammate right in front of the net. It gets stopped, but the puck skills were there enough to create something. And you watch a play like that and you think to yourself, I mean, this is a guy who could score 20 points in an NHL season, maybe. He might have that ability. The skating, I won't go so far as Nick Schultz did in calling him an unbelievable skater, but he's fine. He's a fine skater, especially for someone who is 6'4".
Maybe Schultz meant it literally, like, I didn't believe he could skate this well. I find what I just saw unbelievable.
That's fair. That's very, very possible.
Like,
I thought you were going to make a joke about Nick being like, well, maybe a comparison to him, but
I think of like the offensive upside thing and shut down defensemen. Like, remember those 2 weeks where we were like, Braden Coburn's one-timer, man. Like, that was like a thing. And he did have one, 36-point season, and then the rest were like 20-ish or fewer. But like, I just don't need it that much if, especially, you're going to figure out a way to get him paired with a puck mover like an Andre or a Drysdale or whatever. But I am very excited about having a guy like this. When you mentioned the skating, I just think, like, when guys that size figure out how to take advantage of the power and length of their stride, they can become very, very strong skaters. And maybe that's just something he's figured out at a young age.
yeah, the skating is good enough. I will say that. It's good enough. He's not slow, especially for his size. He's not slow. And you can see it when he's in rush coverage, because as I mentioned in the article, like, being good at rush coverage, being good at denying entries and gap control, like, yes, part of that is defensive instincts and having long reach and things like that. But a lot of it's mobility. I mean, you can be 6'6" and have a super long reach and be great along the wall and have physical strength. But if you can't skate, you're going to get turnstiled all the time.
You better figure out how to not cross over, C-cut, and drive a guy into the wall. Otherwise, he's getting by you, under you, or a long way around you every time.
Exactly. And I will say that McDonald was great in rush coverage because he has the mobility to take full advantage of the size, of the defensive instincts, of the reach. And that was intriguing. So I come away from this camp feeling, I'm still skeptical because, look, it's not necessarily the points. It's not like, well, Hunter McDonald has to score 15 points a year to be an NHL player. Yeah, you'd hope that he gets some cheapy secondary assists if he's creating some offense. But the big thing is that if you don't create offense at lower levels, it tends to imply that you're not doing essentially anything to get play moving in the right direction, because you're not picking up any cheapy assists like, defensemen do if they're at least throwing a decent first pass out to the forward so they can go up ice. And the concern is like, yeah, Hunter McDonald might be a great defensive defenseman, might be great in his own zone. But if he's spending 80% of his shifts in the defensive zone, he's not going to be a good defenseman.
You're just going to you can be the best defenseman ever.
Yeah.
The other four guys, while you're stuck on defense, are probably not that.
Exactly.
You're going to just get scored on a lot.
So he has to, at the very least, provide something from a puck moving ability, not be a total black hole up at the point in the offensive zone. He has to be able to, execute a pass half decently. Those, activate down low if he has to, if that's the way the cycle rolls. And I would say at this camp, he showed me that he might be able to do that. And that makes me feel better about his upside. I'm still skeptical because guys with his profile don't usually become NHLers. It's pretty rare. But after watching him for 4 days, I can see why they think he can be an exception. I get it.
All right, Charlie, about this next player, I just have to ask. All right, so Connor Bedard, Leo Carlson, Adam Fantilli, Will Smith, David Reinbacher, Dmitry Simashev, Matvey Michkov, Ryan Leonard, Nate Danielson, Dalibor Dvorsky.
Okay.
Over whom would you take Oliver Bonk over those guys?
Oh, yeah, because didn't Danny say that?
Said he'd be a top 10
pick. He'd be a top 10 pick. Yeah. I'm skeptical. Look.
He's just talking up his guy.
Danny is obviously trying to present his organization in the best light. I think he probably jumps Danielson, to be sure. Dvorsky, maybe. I don't think he jumps Simashev just because the idea is that his upside, his physical upside, is through the roof. I think he jumps to the top 15.
Okay.
The top 10 is a bit of a stretch because you could certainly make the case that, like, well, Gabe Burrow killed it. You know, maybe he jumps up to the top 10 too because you have, like 60 points in college as a freshman?
But he doesn't count because he wasn't on the Flyers board.
Well, yeah.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
And I guess neither would be Will Smith. So
I would say,
in a redraft, you have to erase those two guys entirely.
That is fair. I would say that Bonk's stock is definitely up. I think saying that he would be a top 10 pick in a redraft is optimistic, not impossible, given the fact that teams reach on defensemen all the friggin' time, but it's optimistic.
It's optimistic, but if you just saw the number, and like, again, I don't know, but I doubt it, like that he fell to 20, and in a year, like not even when you do, 5 years later, let's look at the redraft and see who really translated the best, who developed well, but a year later, it's like, I don't know. But if you just look at the numbers, it's like, well, damn. Yeah, maybe. But Oliver Bonk, I heard some good. I heard some, well, he still needs to work on some things. What was your overall takeaway on Bonk Boy?
I thought, so Wednesday, so this would have been the 3rd, the day before the 4th of July. I thought he was the best player on the ice. He was fantastic. Defensively, especially, you can tell he's made serious strides in terms of his play without the puck, defending 2-on-1s along the boards. He just looks steadier than he did last year. And that's exciting because as much as we've talked about him as like, well, he's this all-around two-way defenseman, his defensive game was in need of work. It was far from a finished product, and it does seem like he's just calmer. He knows what to do without the puck. You know, when he's defending a 2-on-1, he knows that he's got to be defending the pass. And then he baits people into trying to make that pass and then deflects the pass. Like, these are finer points of defensive play that, and in the Flyers, to the Flyers' credit, they thought he was going to get better at these things because they love the fact that he's in London, in a great developmental program that pumps out NHL caliber players. So they were anticipating this, and it seems like they're getting not what they paid for, but what they drafted. They're getting that benefit. He did not look that great in the scrimmage. He had some moments. I have a couple videos of him making good defensive plays, transitioning defense to offense. The thing that you have to remember about the scrimmage, though, for anybody that went to the scrimmage, this was, I don't know if Danny lost a bet to Jonesy or something, because the way they did it was like Team Briere and Team Jones. And Team Jones was stacked, and Team Briere was like, you had Oliver Bonk and you had Carson Bjarnason, and then like all camping.
He got the goalie, and everyone else was on the other team.
Yeah. And Team White, the Jonesy team, just obliterated them. And it just seemed like Bonk was trying to do a lot because he didn't have a lot of help, and then was making more mistakes than he usually does. He was not great in the scrimmage, but I felt like in the drills and defensively on the whole, he had a good camp. I wouldn't say he had a great camp, but he looked fine.
I think we've talked a decent amount about Denver Barkey. And of course, read Charlie's Pete's, allphly.com, become a diehard to read it. But you talked about Alex Bump the other day, and it was the day my connection was shit, and I missed like 5 minutes of the show.
Right.
So I want to talk about him because I heard some good things, read some good things about Alex Bump at this camp. What did you see from him?
I thought he was the most impressive forward in the scrimmage. I put this in my piece that I don't think it's impossible to know this, like, unless I guess you had like tracking software at a fucking development camp scrimmage, which like maybe the Flyers did. I don't think there was a player who possessed the puck more and made more plays with the puck in that scrimmage than Bump. He was the engine. He was on a line in large part with Luchanko. They juggled the lines at times, so it wasn't like he was only with him. But as good as Luchanko looked, and he looked good, like, Bump was the engine of that line. He was the guy driving the play. He was the play driver on the line. He's just a guy where it does seem like the Flyers might have gotten a steal in this guy. And I know the numbers in college in his freshman year weren't incredible. They weren't bad. They weren't incredible. But this is the third camp I've seen him at, and he's popped at each one, and he's only gotten better. I thought Brent Flair's comment after the scrimmage where he said he looks like an NHL player to me, I mean, that's as good of an endorsement as you're going to give to a 5th-round pick. They like him. And look, I'm not saying he's a top liner. I'm not saying that they've stumbled into, their big steal who's going to be a top of the lineup guy. But I watch him and I see a potential middle sixer. I think he has that ability. He has the creativity. He has the vision. He's got a really balanced offensive skill set. He's a guy I would definitely keep an eye on this year. I could see him having a big breakout at Jonesy's alma mater, Western Michigan.
Oh, geez. Yeah, the Harvard
of the Midwest. He used to love that one.
We all silly like the mayor.